Hey friends, welcome to a special edition of the Tennis and Bagels podcast. We have been missing in action for a few days now, almost a month, but that's because we had the off season, whatever you want to make of that in the tennis world. Um, but yeah, now I'm pretty excited because we're looking ahead to 2023. We're going to look at what kind of things that took place in 2022 in the players and, you know, get hyped for the next season. So I'm really happy to have Owen Lewis join me. How are you doing today, Owen?
I'm doing well. And yeah, we apologize for the lack of minute by minute recaps of various exhibitions going around the world. But yeah, I'm also a little bit burned out. And like you said, there hasn't been, an official big tennis event for ranking points in a little bit. So we thought it'd be fun to kind of reflect on the majors in 2022 and then look ahead to 2023, come out with some predictions. Yours will obviously be better than mine because that is how it's gone in the past. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about predictions is I equally love being wrong than I do being right because it just makes it so much more exciting, and it's already kind of very unpredictable at times, especially in 2022. I just felt like um with the whole situation with like Novak not playing two majors and Wimbledon banning Belarusian and Russian players, it felt like there were some openings for a lot of players and there were some opportunities, and uh we'll look ahead to see like kind of who missed out, who took advantage of them, who is best suited for a great 2023. So all of that is really fun. Is a really fun exercise to do, right? But I guess we can start with the majors. In Australia, there were plenty of good matches on the men's and women's side. So what are some that maybe stood out to you, and players that you look forward to seeing how they'll do this year?
That's a good question. I mean, I think Australia was probably the best major of the year to me. Like as we know, for people in the US and various other places, it's horrible sleep schedule wise. I basically those 2 weeks stayed up during the nights, went to classes during the day, and then slept in between. I think I did 3 full all-nighters in the 2 weeks, and it was worth it because I saw a lot of great tennis. I think a couple that jump out right away are Naomi Osaka and Amanda Anisimova. I think in the fourth round, maybe third.
Yeah, third round.
Yeah,
third round. Yeah.
That was just like a killer match, especially the last several points. Since they both hit such a heavy ball and they have so much easy power, they were just like blistering the ball in these cross court rallies. And then whoever pulls the trigger first would hit a winner down the line. And at the end of Anisimova just went nuclear in the last few points of the tiebreak and won, saving a couple of match points, which was interesting too.
Yeah, that's a great place to start because that was probably my best match for the women's side in the tournament, and I just felt like it had that added layer of excitement because the winner was going to play Ash Barty.
Yeah,
and and Anisimova was in great form. Like she had just won a title before. She was looking really good. I think she had Darren Cahill in her corner as well, and there were two match points that she had to save as well in that game before it ultimately went to the tiebreak. And Osaka was playing good. Like it was a good version of Naomi, and Anisimova just came through, and like you said, just going for the backhand down the lines when she could. I love her backhand in general. I actually do think she had a very good year overall. It's just that towards the end of the year, she suffered another injury and couldn't really give her best at the U.S. Open. But I think she made quarterfinals at Wimbledon, fourth round of Roland Garros, and fourth round of Australia, losing to Ash Barty, and I guess winning a few games, which was really hard against Barty in that tournament, as we know. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see how both of them do this year, because I remember Anisimova when she first broke out on the scene. I think in Roland Garros 2019 is when she had a really big run, like got all the way to the semis. I think crushed Halep along the way, and then was up a set and 3-love on Ash Barty, and then Barty ended up winning the Roland Garros, and then kind of her career took over from there. But she's really capable of a lot of great things. Like I love her ball striking. Yeah. She moves decently well. She has a good foundation. Reminds me a little bit of the ATP version of Jannik Sinner. They're both roughly around the same age. They're pretty good ball strikers.
Yeah.
I think she doesn't quite have the like generational type athleticism that maybe Sinner has, but she definitely is very good off both wings and can be a start test for most top players.
I think she has more easy power than anyone on tour, really. Like, I think she's the player where it's most dangerous to leave a ball hanging, and because she can just demolish it, put insane pace on the ball from either wing, and obviously she can be a little erratic. But when she's on, I think there's no more dangerous opponent. And that reminder of Barty waiting in the next round, I had actually forgotten about. I remember I wanted to be annoyed at not getting an Osaka Barty match. But the match between Anisimova and Osaka was so good that I wasn't annoyed. But in retrospect, I think it would have been really, really interesting to see that because Barty just had such an easy time for the most part at the Australian Open. In the final, she was down 5-1 to Collins in the second set, but once she got going, I think she rescued that set pretty comfortably, 7-2 in the tiebreak. And Osaka has the game to challenge Barty. I think like she would give her issues in the backhand to backhand rallies. It's got a great forehand that could go toe to toe with Barty. One of the very, very few who could like maybe outserve Barty. And now, kind of tragically, we're never going to see that matchup. But yeah, kind of transitioning to Barty, like I had forgotten how dominant she was at that Australian Open. Like she was not even dropping serve for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, she like won the tournament, I think dropping just 30 games in total, and her only real test came in the final against Danielle Collins when she was 5-1 down in the second set and managed to pull that out. And now that I think about it, it's an even bigger accomplishment, especially she knew that she was going to retire before, like after that tournament. And like, it was pretty much Wimbledon. I think she had pretty much had her mindset on retirement, after she won it last year. And then this year, this just felt like the icing on the cake. Mm-hmm. But I mean, what a shock that was for the WTA overall, like when she announced her retirement. And we thought we were going to be in for like several world number ones. And, it was going to be like a really tough time transitioning for most players. And it kind of was in a way for the women's game. But Iga Swiatek obviously had a lot of other ideas and just took the baton and just raised it to an absolutely new level where now some people are even having the conversation. It's super early, but some people are already talking about her as a potential GOAT. Because at the pace that if she keeps it up like this. But it's just so amazing how quickly the discussion became from who can beat Ash Barty to like who can beat Iga Swiatek. It was like in a matter of a month.
Yeah, and I mean I think GOAT or even a GOAT is going way too far, way too early. But I think like an all-time great isn't out of the question, right? Like I think kind of like you were saying already, Swiatek now is sort of where Barty was after the Australian Open. Like 3 majors, world number 1, picking up steam, sort of in that place where it's like there's a little bit of an air of invincibility even when they're at their best.
Right.
And she's in that phase of her career where she's not an all-time great yet, but if she continues on this pace, if she keeps improving, which would be insane because her game is already incredibly good. It's so easy to project like gigantic numbers of majors, but yeah, I think Barty kind of showed us the danger in making predictions like that because I think her rationale for retiring made sense. Like she had already achieved a lot. Why should she spend another 10 years of her life achieving a lot of the same stuff she had already done? Like she ticks pretty much all the boxes. I mean, career slam, like 10 majors. She didn't do that, but who does? Like 5, more than 5, but like a handful of people ever. Like not everyone wants that.
Yeah, exactly. And she knew what she wanted. And it seemed like, obviously the travel, the grind, the daily life of being a professional tennis player day in and day out on the tour certainly took its toll. And she was very honest about it. And definitely it's like, she has achieved pretty much everything she wanted besides the US Open. But even in doubles, she made a major final of all 4 and won one. So it's like, and she had this insane number of weeks at number 1 and she proved herself on all surfaces. So I think she was 25 and Swiatek right now is 21, which is crazy because it's like, we might not even have seen the best of Iga and what she's already doing is so generational. And you feel like she's so good on clay that it seems I'm already predicting that she'll win at least one major next year. And
I mean that feels safe, right? Like I feel like you could even go at least 2. I mean, like I think she'll win in Australia because she hasn't won there yet. This year she wasn't the beast on hard court there that she is now. But yeah, it's interesting to think about. I mean, because she is so young. Like it's not, and I feel like people will be annoyed at me for making this comparison. but it's not entirely different from like where Federer was like around this point of his
Yeah.
career, because he had that first year when he won the major. And Iga she didn't win one in 2021, but then Federer has like this very dominant 2004 where he just like wins a ton of stuff. And after that, it's like, okay, he's the guy. How far can he go? And, Iga's year this year wasn't as dominant as Federer's 2004, but I feel like she's in a similar place. Like when she's on, no one can beat her. She's fantastic on hard and clay now. I feel like she can get grass in the future. And it just feels like the entire world is just like stretched out there in front of her.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes a peaking performance to beat her in something out of the ordinary, like a Danielle Collins or Ostapenko, firing those return winners.
Right.
And it's yeah, and it's just like, okay, she didn't win the WTA finals and she lost in the third round of Wimbledon, but it's like, what she did like in between, she also went on a 37 match winning streak, like won 6 titles in a row.
37 matches. It's insane.
We've never seen that before in this century. So it's like, and you're right, like it does seem repeatable. Like, not 37 matches in a row per se, but winning all these titles again. Like it feels like she's already ticked off a lot of boxes, and there's just yeah, like she's going at that rate, which is of those all-time greats, and it remains to be seen whether we'll see like a rejuvenated Krejcikova is something that I find interesting. Krejcikova obviously went on that run after the U.S. Open, and she won Roland Garros last year, got to number 2 in the world, and was suffering from injuries all throughout the year, and then finally hit her stride at the end of the next year. So that's probably another interesting storyline for me is the potential rivals of Swiatek, and I think Krejcikova probably has to be up there, having beaten her in a final. For me, one of the best matches all year, the Ostrava final.
Match. Last game especially. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. So and she's also proven herself as an all-court player. So I'm interested to see if that becomes a rivalry, and hopefully. And I'm also interested to see if Sabalenka, Jabeur, Garcia, players like that, especially Garcia, the second half of the year that she had was really amazing as well. Winning in Cincinnati and winning the year-end championship and going deep at the U.S. Open. And I think even though she got here 5 years ago, Garcia, and she's here now, I think having been through that whole experience and understanding how she needs to play, which is like, stepping in, taking the return super early, coming in, being aggressive and like sticking to that game plan and having confidence in it. I feel like she has a much better understanding of where she is as a player now.
Yeah.
But it's also going to be hard to sustain and see what she actually does at the Australian Open, because obviously this happened with Muguruza last year, and Muguruza had one of the worst years this was probably her worst year ever. And so it's tough to predict these kind of things, but I like where the women's game is headed, because while Iga is super dominant, I feel like there are still players who can challenge her on different surfaces, and I still think it's going to be pretty competitive overall.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said, but I also think the key word there that you said is challenge. Like as competitive as other players are, like let's be honest, like Iga doesn't have a rival right now. Like Jabeur has had 2 shots at her in or not 2 major finals, but US Open final, Rome final. And the second set of the US Open final was quite close, but like she wasn't really in either of the matches. Like she didn't have a lead. Krejcikova, that Ostrava final was incredible, but her peak is not what Swiatek's is. Sabalenka can maybe match her peak, but she has a much harder time finding it. So when she's off, which is a lot more of the time, it's difficult for her. I think Garcia looks great, but I think consistency is also a concern there. So like as of now, I think she could have a rival, but she doesn't at the moment. And so like I agree with what you said. Like it's interesting because she is this dominant figure, and so it's not just can she sustain her dominance. It's like who could get in the way of that. And I think there are a few candidates, but no one jumps out clearly.
No one definitively. Yeah, that makes sense, especially because we just haven't seen more than 2 or 3 matches even between them in terms of great relevance. I guess you could say maybe Sabalenka and Iga have played. I think they played like 5 times this year, and 4 of them were like not even very competitive. And really, the U.S. Open and the year-end championship were the 2 matches that made you think like, this could get interesting. And I think she also beat her Iga last year in 2021. But and I do think Sabalenka is one of those players who yeah, like if she's in form and she's hot and she finds her game throughout the course of a tournament, she can be quite dangerous. But we also know she has some mental hiccups, and obviously the serve being a big challenge, and kind of feels like she's been in the same place for a couple of years now as one of the best players to have not won a major. So
Yeah,
it would be interesting to see if who the other players who win a major are on the WTA next year, especially Wimbledon and yeah, Wimbledon and the other one that Swiatek, doesn't win, or maybe
right.
Swiatek
If
gets
she
three
does
of
win
them.
too, or
Yeah,
yeah. I,
so
I mean,
it's
I agree.
interesting.
Wimbledon does feel pretty wide open. I mean, this year I thought Halep kind of had it with the form she was in, and then she got
Yeah,
crushed by Rybakina. And then in the final, I thought Jabeur had it, and Rybakina came back and beat her too. Although I think Ons sort of suffered from some nerves. There's a big game where she had love 40 in the deciding set and didn't convert there. But yeah, that's the one I think that is momentarily safe from Swiatek. You know, she might lose it one of the three others, or even all of the three others, but like those are hers to win if she plays her best. And it feels like Wimbledon is kind of open.
yeah. I also feel like there's so many wild cards on the WTA where, I mean, obviously we talked about Naomi, but I think, yeah, one of the my other takeaways from that match in Australia was like, oh, Naomi can do this again. Like she can put together a run like this,
Yeah,
and we saw it in Miami, and I thought that was going to be a springboard for greater things to come, but unfortunately, the motivation hasn't quite been there. The a lot of great things she's achieved already, like having won four majors, been number one, done a lot, but it's just difficult to see or difficult to predict how much more tennis she's going to play in her career and how badly she actually wants this. Because it's just tough if you're not playing enough matches and you're not getting the reps and you're getting really tough draws like Danielle Collins in the first round of the US Open or
yeah, that was tough.
um, players like that. So it's kind of hard to predict, but I just feel like she's such a wild card, and because we've seen that she can do it and she's won four majors, you just have to always, I can never like count her out for that
Yeah,
reason.
yeah.
So
I mean, her peak on hard court remains incredible. Obviously, like, so I think this was Miami, but it may have been Indian Wells. She played against Kerber earlier this year at one of those tournaments, I think,
yeah,
and
I
just
think in
I thought it
Miami.
was going to be a great match. Sat down, watched the whole thing, wrote about it. I anticipated that I'd be writing about like an epic, and Osaka just destroyed her. Like Kerber's a great defender, but she was defending constantly, and Osaka's shots were so heavy that you couldn't even really defend against them. Like maybe you get one back, and then she just puts the next one away. And so you watch that, and it's irresistible, really. Like there are no problems with her game. The serve is best in the world, probably. The forehand is massive. The backhand can be like erratic sometimes, but at its best, it's insane. Like remember that match against Serena at the Australian Open last year? That 4-all game in the second. She just hits like three backhand winners.
Yeah,
So it can catch fire like that. You know, the movement is not the best. Like she's still working out movement on clay, especially. But when you have ground strokes like that, like you don't need to be a super mover. But like you said, it's the motivation. Like if you don't, and I don't even really want to use the phrase like if you don't want it badly enough. Like if you're not prepared to get in the mindset of like, okay, I'm going to grind for 2 weeks. It's just not really going to happen. Like I think we've seen that with Djokovic as well. Like there are no problems with his game, but when he's not engaged, he'll have these really weird losses. Like he looks slow, and it sort of seems like every part of his game will like suffer because he's not mentally snapped into it. So I think that is a huge piece of it.
yeah,
I hesitate to make projections for the rest of her career just because like she's on the younger side too. But I'd certainly
yeah.
like to see her back.
She's 25, I believe, and she certainly, if she wants it, there's still plenty of time left, and there's
Yeah.
still, and we know, like, the women's game is deep, but her floor is also so high at her best on hard courts that you can just never like rule out the possibility. And if she does call it, if she does say, I need a break or she needs some more time, it's like, I mean, can I really blame her? Like she's won
Yeah.
four majors, she's done
Welcome to the
everything.
Hall of Fame, Naomi.
Yeah,
Like great career.
like
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I don't think like I'm in a position to really, judge her for that just because,
Yeah.
people are different and this life isn't for everyone and she is kind of an introvert at heart and, it's just like the world is kind of her oyster. She can do whatever she wants at this point because Yeah, I mean, she's super rich. She makes so much money every single year based on endorsements, and she's marketable as heck because she's, because of her background and because she's interesting and because, she's in the world of pop culture as well as tennis. So I feel like there's so many avenues for her outside of the sport as well.
Yeah.
But I feel like the longer she stays in tennis, it's just better for us. So
Yeah,
better
I
for the
agree.
game.
Yeah, I mean, selfishly, I'd like to see her back, but from her perspective, like, who's to say tennis is better than any of these other
Yeah.
options that she has? So, yeah. That was a long side tangent. Going back to the Australian Open.
Oh, I guess now we're just gonna cover the rest of the WTA while we're
Right.
at it.
Um,
But
I,
I was just gonna say, like, there are
yeah,
some other wild cards, right? Like you have Andrescu, for
right.
example. So many losses this year to the eventual winner, or to the eventual, like, a few encouraging moments,
Mhm.
but she never really got it. It's one of those, like, I think she got to the final of Bad Homburg. She made, like, I think she played that really tight match against Swiatek in Rome, like
Well,
one
first set
tiebreak,
at least. Like that first set was
uh,
like, okay, she's so
one
good here
tiebreak and
now.
then a bagel, I think, and then I think Wimbledon she lost to Rybakina. Rybakina ended up winning the whole thing
Right.
round two, I think. And then I think U.S. Open she lost to Garcia in the third round. Like I watched her in San Diego, she lost to Coco Gauff, but it was like a really tight loss, pretty encouraging. And there's just like some of these moments, but she's not the same player she was in 2019, and it's taking a little bit longer. And fitness is always still a concern, but she is definitely one of those players. You feel like if she puts together a good 6 month stretch of consistent results, the one big breakthrough will come.
Yeah. I mean, I think her main thing is just like if she stays healthy, great things will happen because her game is awesome. I think the only other thing is like avoid unnecessary three setters when possible. I think she gets dragged into wars by slugfests by a lot of players who she has the game to beat like 2-2 or 2-4. And maybe that contributes to injury issues because spending so much time on court. That U.S. Open match against Sakkari comes to mind. Not saying
Oh
she
yeah, I remember
should
that.
have
Yeah,
put that one
that's
away necessarily, but that was just brutal. And it
yeah,
ended with her gassing out physically. Although that's also partly because Sakkari is a beast. But yeah, I mean, another match I was just thinking of was it? Do you remember Halep Cornet at the Australian Open when it was so hot that
yes, I
Halep was
do, I
literally
do.
stopping during rallies? Like she was like
Yeah,
walking during rallies. It was insane. And she almost still pulled it out. I thought she was going to. But that was a great match.
yeah, I thought so as well. And that was a great moment for Cornet because she had never been in a.
Yeah.
I think she thought about retiring the year before, and she'd never made a major quarterfinal. And it was always her goal in like 63 attempts. And she gave this like awesome on court speech afterwards. I remember watching the end of that match. So physical, like you said, both players were just, dead on their legs.
Yeah.
And yeah, like just such a war of attrition and some really good quality tennis in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I thought that was amazing at the Australian Open. And then also Danielle Collins' run to the final
Yeah.
because she had some really tough matches in there. I remember against, I want to say one of them was against Clara Tauson and the other against Elise Mertens. Like those third and fourth round matches, she was down like a set and a break, and like she pulled those out, and then she beats Cornet in the quarters, and then of course she plays the perfect match, best match of her career against Fiontek in
That
the
was
semis.
insane. I mean that will probably be the last time Swiatek gets demolished in a major like that for like 5 years. Like
Yeah,
I mean not on grass. I so I don't have the exact stats, but I think I remember seeing a stat that Collins didn't miss a single second serve return in that match. And she was hitting return winners constantly. It was
yeah,
insane.
yeah, and of course I just love her bravado and confidence on the court. She walks up there believing like she can beat anyone, and
Mm-hmm.
she plays that way as well. And like she's been to an Australian Open semi, Australian Open final, I think Roland Garros quarters. Like she's got a really like I think she's one of those few players who can take like weeks off at a time because of her health because she's going through endometriosis and like yeah she has the health issues like on and off. I remember after Wimbledon she took like a long time off and then just comes out and beats Osaka at the US Open and
Yeah.
makes the fourth round. It's like she played maybe 10 or 11 tournaments, but she still finished like inside the top 15. So I feel like, yeah, with like somewhat of a more, like depending on her schedule, like I feel like she's so good that, especially on hard courts now, that she's like definitely still in the conversation for making deep runs.
Yeah, I her confidence really impresses me too. Like I remember after the Australian Open final, she was pissed. Like in that way where it's sort of impressive because it's like you weren't supposed to win this match, but like you're still pissed that you lost it and you felt like you should have won. Like because that speaks to what players think their own potential is, I think. And when they sort of believe they should have won matches that like they weren't favored to win, I think that's very impressive because it like they don't put self-imposed limits on themselves. And so I think like if she gets more opportunities to play in like big finals like that, she might get outplayed by a better player, but she won't beat herself. And I think that is not the case for everyone.
Yeah. I think she also has arthritis, which is like, so she has like arthritis plus endometriosis. So it's pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah,
She's able
that's
to do this. Like yeah, that must not be easy.
yeah, it's incredible. I mean, yeah, her Australian Open run still impresses me. I'm impressed that she just got ahead 5-1 in a set against Barty because that was more than anyone else was doing.
Yeah, like, so yeah, that kind of stood out about the Australian Open. And yeah, we mentioned Krejcikova already. I mean, I guess there's just some other players who showed like really good flashes of brilliance early on in the 2020s, like Mukova and Brady. I'm waiting for those
Yeah,
two to
I miss Brady a
get
lot.
some matches.
Her,
Yeah, Brady has been gone for a long time now with a foot
yeah,
problem.
yeah. When she had those matches against Osaka at the 2020 U.S. Open and the Australian Open last year, so late in the tournament, playing at such a high level. I mean, she was a top player on hard court. Like she was tier
Yeah.
one. So yeah, I'd love to see her back.
Yeah, and then same with Sophia Kenin, who won the Australian Open in 2020, made the French Open
Yeah,
final as well.
it's a long road back for
A
her
long road
now.
back.
Like she's completely fallen off the map.
Yeah. But yeah, and then of course now you also have players, and then you also have players kind of stuck in their positions, if you like, still really high ranked. You know, players like Sakari and Pegula. Pegula obviously having the year of her life, getting to world number 3 and losing to Iga 3 times. Or, I mean, losing to Iga twice in majors and then Barty in Australia.
Yeah.
And she was a consistent performer, consistently getting to quarters and semis. And I was happy for her when she won Guadalajara,
Mhm.
which was a 1,000 at the end of the year, and she beat 4 major champions, and then beat Sakari in the final. But yeah, Sakari is another one of those. Obviously, she had disappointing slam results, but she finished off the year really on a nice note. Getting to the semis of the year and championship, and yeah, just lost a lot of finals, like 4 finals this year: Indian Wells final, Guadalajara final. So you feel like the level is still there. She's a top 8 player, but she's just closing through in those big matches. It seems very mental with Sakari.
Yeah, I really think it will happen for her at some point, but I think that point may still be like a long way off because
Yeah,
this pattern of beating herself in big matches at the end of tournaments is so defined by now. And
Mm.
I mean, her game is so good. Like there are no problems with her game. Like the serve is great.
Yeah,
She's so fit, like strong on both forehand and backhand. Obviously there are like a few things she could do better.
yeah,
Like I think she played Iga in the Indian Wells final.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought Swiatek sort of exposed the lack of margin on some of her ground strokes in that one.
Yeah,
And
particularly her forehand. She likes to hit big from the backhand side, inside out and inside in. And sometimes she doesn't quite give herself enough margin, or sometimes she's super physical. She's such a great athlete. So you feel like, yeah, with her movement and her athleticism, she sometimes tries to pull off too ambitious of shots on some occasions, or tries to cut down the rallies. It seems very sort of, she seems to sort of get in her head in that way. And
yeah,
once she just relaxes and plays very freely, like when she's down in the score, then she becomes super dangerous. I feel like she's one of
yeah,
the best when it comes to like saving break points, ironically.
yeah.
And
Didn't she have a match against Pagula in Miami last year where she saved like 6 match points with winners or something?
yeah, and they were all with winners, and they were, some of them were hitting the lines, and some of them were
Yeah,
just bold shots. But it's usually when she has leads or when she believes
right.
that she can win the title. That's when it sort of creeps up in her head, and
Yeah,
it feels like psychologically that kind of affects some of her timing and technique,
yeah,
and it feels like kind of interrelated.
yeah,
But I think the game is there, like no doubt. Like she did make 2 major semis last year, and nearly
Yeah.
won the French Open. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I really do think it'll happen at some point for Sakura. Like, I think she'll win big titles.
I hope so. I mean, there's quite a bit of scar tissue there, but you would think with that kind of game, at least she gets any kind of a title. That's pretty much all she's missing because she has only one career title, I think, and like
Mhm.
six finals, multiple semis. Like it's at this point, I think it's yeah, like she goes into these matches knowing these stats, and it's
Yeah.
obviously tough to block that out. But all it takes is just one. I mean, we saw what happened with Felix this year,
Mhm.
but but yeah, I think that's about it, especially from Roland Garros. I remember on the women's side, it was obviously a player that we have to talk about is Yang Shin Wen, right?
Mhm.
Because she pushed Iga the furthest at the French Open, took that first set in a tiebreak,
Yeah.
and then was a bit physically compromised for the next two sets. But really, she kind of set the tone this year that like, hey, I'm gonna be like the breakout player,
Mhm.
and watch out for 2023 because I'm inside the top 30 and I've got a bright future. And she seems to do everything pretty well. She's pretty
Yeah.
well rounded. I would say her game is pretty complete. I mean, obviously there's still things to work on, but I like her mentality and she seems quite composed and calm. And yeah, like I don't really see a whole lot there. I think she can honestly get to the top five in the world and potentially challenge for these majors.
Yeah. I mean, her game is sort of uniquely capable of matching Swiatek from the baseline, I think, because her ground strokes have that same weight to them. And she's also like willing to use that drop shot to keep her
Yeah.
opponents guessing. And so it's hard to position yourself perfectly. And if you compare that to sort of the other players that Swiatek beat at Roland Garros, like, I mean, and these are great players, but like Kasatkina in the semis and Goff in the final had like nothing to hurt Swiatek with because they
Yeah.
either didn't have enough power, and so they would just get like overpowered from a certain wing, or they would have an inconsistent shot, and then Ego would force errors. And yeah, and that is not the case in this matchup. Like that, not just it's not just that she won the set, but she was sort of capable of like matching Swiatek throughout, and winning some of these toe-to-toe rallies, which I think is, I mean, other players can't do that. Swiatek is just sort of all conquering from the baseline. So yeah, I think she's got a very high ceiling.
I love her backhand as well. Like I remember her really matching Swiatek for that shot and
Mhm.
picking the right one to go down the line. And yeah, like I mean, she moves pretty well. She's got a pretty good serve as well. So it seems to all kind of be there. Now it's just a matter of putting it all together consistently. And she did show quite a bit of consistency this year too. So it feels pretty safe to think that she'll be ranked a lot higher than she is right now.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, and then obviously you have players like Lyudmila Samsonova, made like deep runs, won titles, like got to the fourth round. I think she has one of the best forehands in the game as well. So it also feels like her game also feels pretty legit. She's also another one of those like Junction Wen, obviously a lot older, but around 20 in the world, you feel like she'll probably be ranked higher at some point next year, particularly that for her first half of the year was not that strong. Um, yeah, I mean, and then I mean, just yeah, going back to Roland Garros, obviously you have Coco Gauff making the final there, and having an overall pretty good year. U.S. Open quarters as well, quite a lot of quarterfinals. No titles, but you felt like she improved this year.
Yeah,
Um, obviously, didn't her year didn't end very well with the WTA finals, but kind of understandable for an 18-year-old because this was the first year she could play so many matches with the
yeah,
age eligibility restrictions.
yeah. And by the end of the year, like physically and
Yeah,
mentally fried. Yeah, I mean, I think like really the only thing in her way right now, because like I think she's improved a lot. I think she's a great game. It's athletic, great backhand, serve return, I think are very strong. The forehand, I think is shaky, but has a lot of time to improve. I think the worst thing is that she matches up terribly with Swiatek, who
and that's because of the
she's
forehand.
she's going to run into constantly. I mean, if so they played four times this year, and so in Miami, Swiatek won 6-3, 6-1, in Roland Garros 6-1, 6-3, San Diego 6-0, 6-3, and WTA Finals 6-3, 6-0. It's very hard to take a positive from that from
Yeah,
Golf's perspective. I mean, she is younger than Swiatek. I think she has a ton of time to improve all of these things. But I think as of now, like that's going to be a very, very difficult matchup to handle.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, she's not really coming close in any of these matches, and like none of them have been. There was not even a flicker of hope in really any of them, and
Yeah.
I feel like the forehand. Yeah, technically, it's a little bit of a flawed shot, in my opinion, because she kind of like if you watch her hit it, there's times where she's against players that she should be beating, where she's really stepping in and taking it early on the rise and following it to net. And I like that kind of play from her. But then there's other times where she's kind of falling back, hitting it on her back foot, kind of hitting it very, taking it late, like hitting it really loopy, like the take back is too long. And you just feel like there's maybe a technical way for her to improve that shot, but it's just, and it would involve like changing the swing path or tinkering with that at such a young age. And the rest of her game is so darn good.
Yeah.
That it can sometimes make up for it and hide it, especially on clay. But it's just, I don't know, to win a major, like I feel like if she improves her forehand and just fixes a couple of things, she can win a slam. I just don't think it'll come next year. I think maybe in 2024, but I would say next year she gets to like a couple of semis, stays in the top five, keeps getting some big runs, hopefully wins a couple of titles or something. That would probably qualify as a good year. But yeah, she's kind of in that like middle phase right now where it's just where yeah, like it's gonna be more or less the same unless that one thing gets better, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a major title isn't out of the question if she doesn't have to play Swiatek, really. Because I mean, she did make a final at 18 years old. That's amazing. I think it's just like certain matchups like that are going to prove tough. But with so much time on her side, I think she will win multiple majors.
And as far as her future is concerned, the stock is super high. So it's just like immediate short-term thinking right now.
Yeah, I mean, she's 3 years younger than Swiatek. Like, that is a lot, especially at this age. Like, if it's a 24-year-old and a 27-year-old, it's like, okay, the 24-year-old has had, like, several solid years on tour. And Gauff has had a few years on tour because her breakout was so early. But she's still got so much time. I mean, she's got, at the very least, like, another solid decade of, like, prime years if she chooses to play that long and stays healthy.
Yeah, of course. And of course, on the WTA, before we, start to shift things a little bit, I do have to mention Alicia Parks because she's been on a tear since the US Open. Obviously, more at challenger level, like WTA 125s. She's won a couple of them. I also watched her in Ostrava, where she qualified, and then she beat Pliskova and Sakkari. And I thought her game is quite impressive. She has a really big serve, moves pretty well, pretty dynamic athlete, covers the court well. Extremely versatile, likes to come to the net. She will have some matches where it goes off the boil and it doesn't look very good. But then there's other times where if she's fully locked in, and she's, I think, 21, 22, she just has a lot of confidence and momentum right now. Mm-hmm. Going into the next season in the WTA landscape, I think that's pretty valuable, especially if we've seen players like Andreescu in the past in 2018. She went on a similar run like this and then, ends up winning Indian Wells and ends up doing all these great things. I'm projecting that Alicia Parks will do the same, but obviously there just have been examples of this in the past where players have this amazing rare thing at the challengers, and then it just kind of, because they're so new and because they're in that honeymoon phase, it's just so hard for the established top players to sort of game plan against them, right? And so I feel like she could come out of the gates in 2023, maybe not directly in Australia, but I feel like potentially at some point in the hardcore events during the year, I could see her doing some real damage. She's at 75 in the world right now, so her ranking jumped up like 60 spots in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. So she's kind of like, I guess if you want to make an ATP comparison, like the Ben Shelton of the ATP right now. So it's like, those are just a couple of players to watch out for, I would say.
I haven't really gotten a chance to see her play, but I'm excited to follow her in 2023. Ranking of 75, that means main draws at majors. So like opportunities to maybe make a couple more high profile runs. She'll have a ton of momentum, kind of like you said. Seeing on her page that she's 6'1", so I think
ideal size.
Yeah, for the serve to get incredibly good. I'm excited to watch her in the future.
Yeah, that's right. And the serve is quite a weapon, like especially on those indoor courts. I was watching her in Australia. She ended up losing to Krejcikova, who ended up winning the title and gave her a pretty good pretty good second set, but it was those two consecutive matches against Pliskova and Sakkari that made me think, oh, okay, that's not a fluke. This is something she can actually put this together. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, it's hard to predict, but yeah. And then going back to the French Open, I had Leylah Fernandez as well was one of my stories because she, like she unfortunately was out for a long time and had to miss Wimbledon after that run, but she ended up beating Bencic and Anisimova along the way, and she played that 3-set match against Trevisan, and
with like a broken bone.
With like a broken bone, yeah, and it was like very impressive because even though she lost that match, she just refused to give up. And in hindsight, it might have been better if she had retired in that match because
it would have been. But
it would have.
I get what you're saying. Like I was in the stands for part of that, and I mean, she's got that insanely rare quality. Like she should have retired, but she didn't. And even with that massive injury, it was close. Like I think she was down to a double break, and she got one back, and then she got to 15-30 when Trevisan was trying to serve it out. Like she was still in that match. And, I don't recommend playing through injury. I wish she hadn't done it. I wish Nadal hadn't done it at Wimbledon. But, I mean, her drive is nearly unmatched. I think she's got another very, very rare quality where she can play. It's sort of like what Djokovic has on match points, I think. Like, I think certain pressure situations, match points, like, she's got something that other players don't. She can play like the score doesn't matter. And I think her game is really unique. Like she's one of the best timers, ball strikers. She can take the ball early. She's one of the players I'm most excited to follow in the coming like half decade plus.
Yeah, and I also do feel like that definitely interrupted her season, and I think she finished 40 in the world. But if I actually really look at her results, I mean, she won a title in Monterrey. Her win percentage was not awful considering it was her first year after making a major final. And it's a little bit like, I guess it's kind of misleading and it's kind of tempting to put her in the same camp as Raducanu. But if I actually look at her year, she had some good moments. Like, and even at the US Open, I remember she lost in the second round, but she almost won that second set against, so what was it, Samsonova, I think? Yeah, Samsonova. Samsonova was on like a 13-match win streak at the time. So I felt like that was probably expected. But nonetheless, I think, Fernandez is so young as well. I think she's even younger than Swiatek, so she's got a lot of time. And like I wouldn't be surprised to see her in the top 20 at some next year because assuming she's healthy and she's able to play a good schedule. But
and I don't know if she's totally ready to threaten for big titles regularly yet, but like I wouldn't be surprised if we saw her in the semis of the major or threatening for a big title at some point.
Because the way she was looking in Paris, I mean, she pulls out that Trevisan match. That Goff match is kind of up in the air, and potentially she's in the major final. Right. Probably wasn't gonna beat Swiatek, right. But nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, but I think on the whole, though, like there are a lot of players who can play it at an incredibly high level, but Swiatek is doing it by far the most consistently, and so I think there are candidates for a rival for her in 2023. But right now, it's Swiatek and then everyone else.
And then there's just so many good players that I look at them like, how have you not done better? But then it's like, oh yeah, that's why, because there's all these other great players too. It's like, I think of like Belinda Bencic, like amazing, like 2019 makes the US Open semis, like plays that awesome match against Andreescu, like, Olympic gold medalist, like wins titles, like has her really good weeks. And then I watch her in those really good weeks and I'm just like, how have you not been past, how have you not been past like the fourth round of like Wimbledon yet, or like of the Australian Open? And it's like, or even Roland Garros, it's like it seems like kind of low hanging fruit, but then you actually look at the draws and you're like, oh yeah
like you have to play like that consistently, like every match sometimes if you're going to get through some of the draws. I mean, and remember when Raducanu had that random like 2 or 3 match hot streak in Cincinnati, and it was like, wait, is she back? Like,
I thought so. Although Azarenka and Serena were way off their games.
I agree, but
it just shows like the level is still there. Like, I mean, she played a really good match against Stephens in the first round of Australian Open, and I think she won that first round, and then I think she got injured in the second round against Kovinic. Like she had some blisters.
She had to like slice her forehand.
But I was like that was impressive because it's like you could have lost like 6-4, 6-1, but you like tried to win, believed you could win, and didn't come through in the end. But like you learned a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I also thought her clay season was like pretty decent. Like she won quite a few matches, like 5 or 6, and she played Swiatek like pretty decently in Stuttgart. It was like 4-4.
Yeah,
There are like some flashes, and then I think towards the end of the year she made a semi and won 3 matches in a row for the first time all year, and then was up a set on Ostapenko and then retired. So it's like I think she had a lot of fitness issues as well. Like it was just tough to forget about like all the off court stuff and the expectations and all of that from the public. But it's just like just playing week in and week out was just something she was never used to because it's like yeah.
I think in a lot of ways, the farther away that U.S. Open title gets, the easier her path on tour will be. Just because that pressure will gradually go away. She'll get more experience. I mean, I think this year could be more productive for her than
Me too,
last year was, because it is much more typical of like a year on tour rather than sort of one like massive bright flash at the end.
Yeah, and it was encouraging to see that she is working with Jez Green, who is Andy Murray's fitness trainer, and so many countless of other players. So it's great to see that. I mean, I hope she keeps like she has that stability with the coaching situation and all of that. Like they're trying some new things with like different coaches for each stroke, and like once she got rid of the coach that she won the U.S. Open with, there was already kind of signs of trouble.
Yeah.
But regardless of that, I still think I wouldn't rule out like her finishing between 25 and 40 next year in the rankings. And maybe even winning a title at a 250 level or making a deep, maybe getting to a second week of a slam or something like that. I still feel like it'll be much more of like you said, like a typical 25 through 50 kind of year.
Yeah.
I think.
So to kind of round out this segment, because we're on pace to have like a 2-hour podcast at this point.
Yeah, you're right.
Or hour and a half or something. I don't want to do like full predictions for next year, but sort of what do you think is going to happen with Swiatek? Like, what are your predictions for her? How much is she going to win? How is the rest of the field going to do in terms of challenging her?
So I feel like because she has such a massive lead in the points, and she has like twice as much as Jabeur, and she's won all of these things. She does have a lot to defend, but she also has some. But I also feel confident in her defending a lot of it. So I feel like she's going to win at least a major, likely 2. I think I might even go with 2 just because I feel that safe about her right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think she might win 2 majors. I think she'll probably win one of the Indian Wells or Miami, probably win Rome. She probably wins another hardcourt 1000. It's like I see a similar kind of year, maybe not as dominant, but a year pretty similar. Kind of like if Iga's year this year was like a Djokovic 2011, maybe she has a Djokovic 2012.
I was just thinking that exact same thing. Where it's still number one, just not quite as dominant.
Yeah, I still think she'll finish the year number 1. I don't see anyone else doing it really.
Yeah, I think she'll be number 1 for all of next year, honestly. And I sort of agree with you. Like, I'm going to say 2 majors. Like, I think she gets Australia and then probably Roland Garros again. But I think she could win 3 even. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if she got everything except Wimbledon. I also wouldn't be surprised if someone took her out in Australia or she only won 1 major, only in quotes. But like, I think 3 is certainly on the table.
And then who do you think is going to win? Do you think any of Jabeur, Sabalenka, or Garcia or Sakkari is going to win a major? One of those 4. Or Krejcikova. I'll throw Krejcikova in there as well.
This is so hard to predict because it's kind of contingent on like, do they have to play Iga? I think if they do, I kind of feel best about Sabalenka's chances just because I think she's the most capable of redlining and winning. But then on the flip side, she's probably the least likely to win 7 matches in a row in terms of the consistency of her game. I think Sabalenka and Garcia, I think, could do it maybe. I think Jabeur is probably a better player, but is less likely to beat Swiatek head to head. It's really tough to say. I honestly think the main deciding factor is going to be like, where does Iga lose, and then who is going to be best positioned to swoop in after that. I wouldn't back any of these players to beat her in a major final. She's too
I wouldn't either. I could see a situation where we have Jabeur, Sabalenka, Krejcikova all doing really well at Wimbledon and getting far in the tournament. I don't know who's gonna, I can't really say. Like it's very much draw dependent, but I do see Iga winning 2 slams. I think.
Yeah.
Um,
I think Krejcikova could get one. I think her game is reliable in a way that maybe some others aren't. Like I think
feel
she
good
can,
about her. Yeah.
yeah, like I feel like she can go toe to toe with Iga, like not overpower her, go toe to toe with her. And that could be helpful. She can use the angles. But yeah, I don't know. It's really tough to say.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then of course, yeah, the way Swiatek won the US Open was just incredible. Like, not playing her best, but coming through in those really big moments. And
Yeah.
I think that's what really solidified it for me. But I think that's pretty much it for the women's game.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry if
Unless
we
there's some
missed
more.
like maybe some of the good matches at Wimbledon, but I think holistically we covered a lot of it.
I think at Wimbledon, I mean, some of the best matches, Tan and Serena,
Yeah.
that has to be up there for sure. I thought that the match between, I think, was it Niemeyer in the quarters.
I don't remember honestly.
Yeah, like Niemeyer, I think was involved in it. Like there was some good matches in the quarters of that tournament, I want to say. I think it was, yeah, was it Niemeyer and Bushkova or something? No, I don't think it was that.
Well, Wimbledon I followed the least this year.
Yeah,
I didn't even watch a lot of
I was actually in India when this was happening and I couldn't catch. I had a blind spot for this part of the tournament, but yeah, like yeah, some cool stories. Oh yeah, it was Maria. It was Tatiana Maria. Yeah, that's what it was. But yeah, that was yeah, Wimbledon. I don't think I guess the final was pretty decent.
Yeah. Had drama for sure.
Knock it out. But yeah, and then of course US Open we had the Sabalenka Iga semifinal, so
that was I mean Sabalenka being up 4-2 in the third, that was those last 4 games were wild, and sort of her suffering a really tough semifinal defeat at the U.S. Open for the second year in a row.
Yeah,
very similar loss to Fernandez in 2021. But yeah, do you want to move on to the ATP?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. I have to eat dinner, so I probably have less time for this. But so the first ATP match that came to mind for me when you asked that initial question was actually Alcaraz Berrettini in the third round. And while Alcaraz didn't win that, I feel like in a way it was sort of prophetic of how the rest of the year was going to go, because he showed off so many impressive signs in that match where it was like, even though he lost, it was like he's coming for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. That definitely foreshadowed everything because he was 2 sets of down, and the way Alcaraz really turned that match and was by far the better player for sets 3 and 4, and even a lot of set 5 until the tiebreak. Yeah, and then I guess Berrettini showed off like the impressive forehand and serve and the reliability that he has in majors to, and in the clutch moments, he didn't make a single unforced error in that tiebreak, and probably I would say his best win so far in a major. At that point.
And the one
he's been to a
base
major
as well
final
was good, because that one he was up 2 sets as well and had to win it in 5.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, and even though Alcaraz lost in the first 3 majors of the year, I mean, those 3 players played some of the best matches, like the best match of their life in a major to beat him. So I think that's, yeah, and then like you said, it did spark off that incredible run, especially from Rio and Indian Wells and Miami. I mean, he should get a trophy alone for winning that second set against Nadal in the win in Indian Wells.
That was nuts.
That
was a very good match for a lot of the time. And Nadal hitting all those volleys in the third set from like reflex positions. That one was fun. I really think that was the best stretch of the year overall during Swiatek's win streak and Alcaraz's kind of
at the same time,
stretch. Because they were both like so electrifying in the highlight reels. I mean, Alcaraz was really the face of a lot of that first half of the year for me. I mean, you had Nadal,
Alcaraz and Nadal as well.
Yeah. I mean, like Nadal obviously because he won the 2 majors, but sort of in that stretch between that, with Alcaraz winning Miami and Madrid, it was really like, okay, he's gotten here a lot faster than I thought.
Yeah. Not to go on a tangent here, but that was also a really good advocate for why these exhibitions really don't mean much in the larger scheme of things. Because Nadal played those exhibitions, didn't do well, then lost to Andy Murray, lost to Shapovalov, then goes on his late match winning streak, and he gets COVID right after.
He lost to Andy Murray. I forgot about that.
Yeah, it was in that exhibition and whatever
Yeah.
they play in Abu Dhabi, or I think is where it was. Yeah, and then he just goes on this 20 match winning streak. And most people still didn't think he was going to win AO.
Right.
One, because of the draw. Obviously, you had the uncertainty about Novak not being there, but they still put Medvedev ahead of him. They still thought Zverev was going to beat him. They still thought, those three matches in the ATP 250 were not going to be enough.
Yeah.
They thought Shapovalov had him after he won the fourth set.
Even against
he had a heat stroke.
It looks tricky for a little bit in the fourth set.
Right. And then so he had that, and then in the final, no chance, 2 sets to love down, 2-3 love 40. We all know what happens.
Right.
But it's like, just the improbability of it all, combined with all the Djokovic fiasco that happened before. It's just, you couldn't script it. Like it was one of those stories that you just,
yeah, I mean, they should really make like a movie out of it, or the Australian Open YouTube channel should do like a hour-long feature on it. Yeah, I mean, I rewatched the whole final and basically summarized every point for Popcorn Tennis. So if you want to read my thoughts on it, you can go there. But something I came across when watching the match is that now famous like 4% thing of the win predictor. That actually came early in the third set. Like, I think after the first game when Medvedev held after saving a break point. So that means it would have been even lower at 2-3 love 40, like probably 2%, 1% at that point. The amount of ground he had to make up to win that match is insane. And kind of conversely, like, it's become emblematic of Medvedev's year, really. That was as good as it got for him.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then of course, you had the Indian Wells run to the final. He was on that 20 match win streak. I think he was down and out against Korda, like 5-2 down in the third set.
Right, yeah.
Break. Somehow survived that.
Yeah.
Like somehow survived those matches against Kyrgios in the quarters, Alcaraz in semi. It was the best start he's ever had in the history of his career from a statistical standpoint, winning 20 matches in a row.
As bad as you can feel for like one of the best ever with hundreds of millions of dollars in prize money, I did feel bad for him that he didn't get Indian Wells, because it was a very impressive run to the final. Yeah. And then, he didn't make a huge deal of it at first, but then I think he said in an interview it felt like he's getting stabbed by needles in the midsection when he was in quite a lot of pain, particularly towards the end of that match, and I still think Fritz had to show a lot of gumption though to win it, because he himself was not feeling his best. He also had his ankle. He also had his ankle numbed before the final, and then ended up having to pull out of the entire clay stretch. So that match was strange, because they were both struggling physically, yet Nadal was struggling a lot more physically, it looked like, than Fritz was. But it still felt like, such a big match, because then they would go on and they'd play at Wimbledon. With
the fifth set tiebreak, and Nadal having the injury there, and then it was like, and then they met again at the end of the year. But so that's one of those matches now where I'm curious to see where that rivalry, I guess, takes us next year, because it's now has 2 wins.
It'd be great to see them play at the Australian Open, really. I think that could be a really fun quarterfinal. Maybe even a semifinal. But yeah, I think sort of a sneaky part of Nadal's winning streak that I think was up there with like his most impressive moments was that semifinal with Medvedev and Acapulco.
Right.
Which he won 6-3, 6-3, but he had to save all 11 break points he faced. In the second set, there was a stretch where Medvedev was holding easily, and Nadal at 1-2 saves 4 break points, and then at 2-3 saves 7 break points. And there was a stat at one point where like Medvedev had played 13 points on serve in that set, and Nadal had played like 30. And I think at one point he had played like 50 points on serve. I know there was a 20-point game. But he got the holds, and then he was already up a break when he played those games, but he got those holds, and then in the last game he broke from 40 love down. And so when he won that felt very emphatic, because Medvedev was number 1 at the time, first meeting, only meeting since their Australian Open final. When he did that, I was like, he's already had a good year, but he's gonna have a good year.
Like, yeah, that was maybe level wise his best tournament. Now that I think about it,
Probably.
like from start to finish. I mean, obviously not the same level of opposition aside from Medvedev, but
Hmm.
still a pretty big, emphatic statement, I guess, to the rest of the tour. But yeah, and then I mean, it was marred by injuries as well. I mean, the match against Shapovalov in Rome, and before that, he still had those epic matches in Madrid, coming back from the rib injury against Goffin, where he saved
Fan.
4 points.
I feel like everyone's like forgotten about that one just because so much has
Yeah,
happened. Like it was a big deal at the time, but like you just reminded me of it now. It's like, yeah, that happened. It's kind of interesting to see how the year has shaken out because, Nadal definitely the face of the ATP that first half, winning both majors. Um, and, injuries had a big hand in this, but then the second half of the year, he really sort of fell away and it was,
yeah,
and then other people like came to the fore. I feel like the second half of the year was much more Alcaraz and Djokovic. Yeah,
yeah. It was kind of like a year of thirds. They all had their stretches of domination, and it was just it was like yeah. And because Djokovic, obviously from Rome till the end of the year, was phenomenal. Like he won 5 titles and
yeah,
lost the one final to Rune in Paris. But apart from that, and the one Laver Cup match and the Roland Garros quarterfinal. But apart from that, it was pretty much his to lose. And then you also had the Alcaraz stretch until Wimbledon, and then you had the Nadal first half of the year, and then at the end you had like Felix and Rune and all these other players, Rude as well, making his mark. It was like so it was kind of like you could make a case this year for like either of those three being player of the year, and I probably would say yeah, you probably have a good point. But just the fact that Nadal pulled two ahead and
yeah,
still leads the slam race, I think that's very significant because
yeah,
just him having won those two majors, it's like for the other two to have had a really strong argument, they would have to do like a lot more outside of that. But it was just the fact that he was able to win those two, I think, is pretty big. And he did finish off his year with a win at the ATP finals. And then I think we're not talking about the foot anymore. That's the other thing.
yeah.
It's like at the
Yeah,
end of
this
the
treatment is working. Yeah,
yeah, like that seems to be working so far. It's still probably a concern because of his history and given everything in the back of his mind. And we still don't know how much longer he's going to play and all of that. What we do know is that um, if he could win the French Open this year, then I mean, what's to say that he can't win it again next year? Like, I'm not
exactly. Yeah, and
like
that has been the case since 2005. So, um,
right. And then
but
just the fact that he still made the semis at Wimbledon, having not played on grass in 3 years, and that he won the Fritz match.
yeah, I'm
It's just like, yeah,
I'm still mad about the whole way that unfolded. It sucks that he got hurt and he couldn't play the semi because a Nadal Djokovic final there would have been amazing on many levels. And I want to sort of focus on Djokovic for a minute because you said like since Rome he's been phenomenal, and that's true. But it's really interesting to me how I think in arguably the most significant match he played this year, which is that match against Nadal at Roland Garros,
yeah,
he didn't quite have it.
he didn't have it. That's
And I
true.
think that's the first time he didn't have it in like a really big match. I mean, you've got the US Open final last year. Um, but I think that one he had the excuse of being physically and mentally fried. In this match, like he had destroyed four opponents in straight sets. He was rested. He had just won Rome. Nadal had more on his legs. Like Djokovic was actually favored. And he didn't really I think he played well for a lot of the match, but I don't think it was like a typical Djokovic performance, like a lockdown performance. Um, I think he
I feel the
probably still
same.
regrets that one.
Yeah, particularly the way the fourth set unfolded with the two set points that he had, particularly the fact that he gave Nadal such a big lead in the fourth set tiebreak,
Hmm.
that he pretty much had to Hail Mary his way back to get to 6-4. And then yeah, like the first set, such a slow start. The second set, he had to red line. Third set was not good.
Yeah,
So it's like he had all these dips. And then, I think the crowd also was bothering him, like the reception that he got when he first came on the court.
right.
There were all these other factors. And I think at that point, I don't think his relationship with Nadal was really good at that point because of just like, he didn't think that Nadal supported him in the whole Australia thing that was
Yeah,
weighing on his mind. It's just, and then he knew the importance of that match because if he wins that, then yeah, the winner of that was pretty much essentially going to win that tournament, especially when Alcaraz lost. I still
yeah,
felt like, I mean, you never know because Zverev was playing the best major he had played until that point, but it's still, but you still would have favored the winner of whoever won, and just yeah, historically it was a pretty big match. But I still think like come again next year. Usually by the time Rome comes around, Djokovic is still either he's still right behind Nadal to win Roland Garros.
Yeah,
It's just
I wouldn't rule out him winning.
it's just like
but
it was just kind of restored again from 2021, and Nadal showing that like yeah, you beat me last year, but this isn't the norm. Like we played 10 times and I beat you 8 out of the 10.
right, yeah. But yeah, just the way that match unfolded was really interesting to me because I think like the first set you can say Djokovic started slow, but I don't think anyone ever was going to win that set against Nadal. And then the second set he pulls out from 0-3, 15-30 double breakdown.
Yeah.
And then the third set, he just like wasn't really a factor. And I remember watching that, and it's like you're gonna let this set get away this easily and back yourself to beat Nadal at Roland Garros from 2-1 down. Like really, like why are you doing this? Like, I thought it's sort of 2013 where he lost the third set of their semifinal there that year 6-1, and it's like what are you doing? Like, and he came back and almost won that one, but. Yeah, I don't know. I think for vital stretches of the match, he wasn't quite himself, and that was very costly. So even though they've played there a lot and they haven't really played on hard court, I want to see them play again there next year. Just because every match they play there is different. And it's all interesting to me, really.
Yeah. Yeah, and still like the level in that match was still probably good enough to be a top 5 match of this year. So it was, I mean, like it was still better than you'd still probably rate it higher than even the fourth round, even though Rafa did get pushed to the fifth set. I felt like the fifth set of that match was amazing, but
yeah, it was so
wasn't. But it was a very different type of match in that it was much more on the Felix serve +1 and kind of maneuvering Nadal around, and Nadal had his dips in that. But then the way he finished in that fifth set really carried over, I think, into the Djokovic match. He really felt good about how he needed to play. But he's felt that way in all 3 of their last Roland Garros meetings. He's always come off to a really quick start.
Yeah,
and I think Novak can't allow that to happen the next time they play because he did it once in 2021, but it's just not it's just not sustainable. You have to redline to get your way back.
Yeah, I mean I agree with you that it's he can't really afford losing the first set, but at the same time, like, does he have a choice? Like, I mean, you look at Nadal's level in those sets, and it's like, what are you really going to do? Like, redlining perfectly out of the gates, I guess, but that's so hard to do. Like, just not feeling any nerves.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, and so Nadal goes on, wins the title very comfortably over Casper Ruud. Yeah, who in his own right, he made the French Open final. Had a great breakthrough. Played some good matches against Rune and Cilic, and got past the third round, which was a big hurdle for him. And I'm thinking about it now. He didn't even have a good clay season until Rome, because he got to the semis of Rome, and then he won Geneva, and then he made the French Open final. But before that, was really kind of mediocre. Like he didn't have any good results until Rome.
Until Roland Garros, wasn't he down 2-1 at some point?
He was,
in an early round.
Yeah, in the third round against Sonego, he was down 2-1.
Right.
But
yeah,
he got out of that, and then I think he had a 4-setter with Hurkacz. Oh yeah, in the first round he also retired Tsonga. I forgot about that
so easily.
Yeah, he beat Hurkacz, even though Hurkacz was up a break in the fourth, and you still felt like Ruud had a decent chance to get this.
Yeah, I remember a lot from that match. Basically, Ruud wins the first 2 sets like he's playing a junior, and then in the third set, Hurkacz wins a highlight reel point. Crowd goes crazy. He gets a set out of it. And then once Ruud recovered in the fourth, that was that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Casper Ruud is going to be interesting for me next year because he didn't play the Australian Open.
Yeah.
He didn't really have a preseason because
he's probably world number 1 after the Australian Open, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm thinking. But then it's like, yeah, like he has to have a really good result in Australia. Probably has to have a really good result at Indian Wells. Probably has to defend most of his Miami points. But then after that, his clay stretch was kind of mediocre until Rome. So then it's like, and then, yeah, and then even after the U.S. Open, I guess, is another spot in his calendar and on grass. But like, so as good as he was this year with those big runs, he kind of had moments where he lost a few matches in a row where he wasn't, he kind of went in and out for a bit. But like, Yeah, I mean he has a decent chance just math wise and points
Yeah.
wise, along with Djokovic, of course.
Yeah, I think this sort of segues nicely into the Australian Open because Ruud didn't play. Alcaraz lost early, so he can pick up points too. He's already world number one. Djokovic didn't play. Like, is Djokovic, Nadal's defending champion. Is Djokovic going to win the Australian Open? Like, because I think he is a pretty big favorite. Like,
Yeah,
I think if he plays his best, no one can beat him. Um, but I don't know whether he'll play his best. And I also wonder if like an Alcaraz Medvedev 1-2 could take him out.
yeah, you do wonder about sort of the cumulative effect that these best of five matches have on Djokovic at this point in his career, right? Just because, I mean, let's say he gets like a really tough fourth round, but then a really tough, then he gets like, a Medvedev in his quarterfinal or like a Alcaraz, and then he gets like, yeah, like if he has an Alcaraz Medvedev combo, like you were saying, or if he has
For
a really
Felix,
tough
yeah.
fourth round, and like it could be like the wear and tear of the fourth round, quarters, semis, and then maybe he has a day doesn't have like he has a really long extended semi. Like I'm still kind of curious to see whether he still has it in him completely physically after these long breaks. Like you still have to prove it again. He is the favorite just because he's never lost a semi, never lost a final. He's won this thing 9 times,
Mhm.
and he looks like the best player in the world right now. But nothing is for certain right now, and he does have a decent amount of challengers, like more than Swiatek does, I would say. Like
I
it's
agree.
like it's at this point maybe Wimbledon is the one that's the safest for Djokovic to win.
Definitely, I think
I
'cause
think
no
he's
one can
probably more
rely on
likely
the
to win.
rest.
I put up a poll and 70% of the people said he's more likely to win Wimbledon than it is to win Roland Garros just because of the number of contenders.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It's,
Like yeah, I mean Wimbledon, he's won four in a row now. And
yeah,
2018, 2019, he was very close to losing, and I guess this year as well, just down 2 sets to Sinner. Um,
yeah,
but besides those moments, it's all felt very comfortable.
yeah. So I think he is the favorite, but like I can't say like 100%. Like uh, it's not like a shoe in.
Yeah, I'm excited to see his draw because if it's like Medvedev in the quarters and Alcaraz in the semis, I don't know. Like that could be, I think Alcaraz
Or
has
like
the
a
best chance of beating
Sinner
him.
or Rune in the fourth
Yeah,
round, or like a Kyrgios in the third round. Like it doesn't seem like it's like there could be tough bats there.
yeah. This is reminding me of like my Djokovic hater days and be like, okay, I hope the draw is bad like every round, and then I'd look at it and be like, oh, he's gonna destroy everyone.
Yeah, but then then he also just has those random moments where in the fourth round, like in 2016, he goes 5 sets against Joe Simone, and you're like, I didn't see that one coming. Or like he'll lose a set in the like these majors. Like he never wins one without dropping a set. Like he's always
Right.
lost one. He's always lost one set, and then you get to the semis and the final, and you're like, oh yeah, now it's like he's gonna win.
Yeah.
He's gonna win the semi. He's gonna win the final. It's like in Australia,
2021 was insane. Like, because he
yeah.
was like totally struggling, massive ab
And now
tumor,
he's
and
just
then he
like,
get
oh,
like
I'll just lose the first set and then I'll
yeah.
come back. And it's like he
Right.
keeps doing it
But,
again and again now. It's
but yeah,
nuts.
that was something I was thinking. Like, even if he does win, I can still guarantee you he will lose a random set to someone at some point, probably more than one.
And usually he knows what he's doing because he's pacing himself energy wise and he's
Mhm.
strategic sometimes about letting a set go and then just like when he has this like ironclad ability to play his best tennis when it matters the most, and it's like you can't really teach that. Like it's just
Yeah.
he just has that level of mental toughness, I guess, and combination of experience
Yeah.
and going for history, which he's not shy to admit. So that's good.
Right. Yeah, I think he understands himself so well. Like he knows he has that switch that he can flick and just become perfect. But I think he also understands that once he does, like the light bulb will burn out after a little bit. And so he knows that like until he flicks that switch, he's gonna have to be like shaky sometimes. But then once he gets to the point where like, the semis or like break point in the final or whatever, then like he's just gonna be in God mode.
Yeah. And yeah, like the other really interesting player is going to be Medvedev. Like, how does he do at the Australian Open? Because he's defending those final points, and he's number 7. It's crazy to see a 7 next to his name, but
Could he drop out of the top 10 if he goes out early?
yeah, I think some other things would have to happen, but it's pretty likely. Like, if he doesn't defend, like if let's say he loses in the quarters instead of the final, like he's already dropping almost 1,000 points. So
Yeah.
it's
And,
um
and it's not like it's not beyond possibility, right? Like, do you think he'll make the final again? Like, I don't really think so as of now.
Yeah, you can't really say with any confidence. Like, maybe I'm confident he'll get to the fourth round, but that's about it, really. Like, it's not, it's not very like we'd have to see I'd have to see some good performances from him leading up to the Australian Open. If he does,
Yeah,
like, I think he's playing in Adelaide along with Djokovic and Felix Rune and Sinner. Like, they're all playing in that tournament, so that'll be a really good field for a
yeah,
250.
for sure.
Like,
Um,
that's
but yeah, I think all the same, Medvedev is still a compelling like character in the Australian Open because
yeah.
it doesn't really matter that he's not at his best. Like if Djokovic gets him in the quarters, like that's not going to be easy. You can't
Mhm.
blast your way through that match, even though he did in the 2021 final. I don't know if he could do it again. It's going to take a lot out of him. Like you remember him like literally shaking in their best of three match in the World Tour finals. Like I don't think anyone wants to play Medvedev in best of five, but they're going to have to.
Right. But yeah, like he's still gonna have like, yeah, like you said, it's still gonna be a super tough out to beat him just because, like, with that level of return and that serve and that backhand and that octopus like movement, it's just gonna be
Yeah,
really hard to,
yeah,
like, you can't hit through the guy. You have to hit around him and you have to, you know, expose some of his other flaws, but they're really hard to do because,
mm-hmm.
yeah, and I think, yeah, it also comes down to his mental state and what he decides to do in the big points.
Yeah.
But
Don't hit drop shots. I'd suggest that.
yeah, and don't hit an underarm serve on match point, for crying out
Oh
loud.
my
But yeah,
god. We need to do an entire episode about that moment at some point because that was uh
yeah,
that
or
was
yeah,
insane.
but it's yeah, that's just what happens. Like, Medvedev is a little crazy, but it's just,
Yeah.
I think that's part of the appeal of watching him.
Yeah, there's a method to the madness most of the time. Um
Yeah,
but yeah, kind of moving into predictions a little bit, like what would you say are like the surest things about 2023? Like Djokovic winning Wimbledon, stuff like that.
yeah, I think I can still say that Djokovic and Nadal will finish in the top five.
Yeah, I think so too.
Um, I think that's a pretty sure bet. I think just some combination of Djokovic and Nadal win at least two of the four majors. I think that seems kind of sure. I'm saying two instead of three, but
Interesting.
could be three.
So which of the
Just to be
first
just to be
three
just to be
goes to someone
safer,
else?
just to be safer. But
Yeah.
I still think three is more likely than two. But
Okay. So if it is two between the Australian Open, Roland Garros, and Wimbledon, which one do you think goes to an outsider?
oh yeah, then it would have to be Australia because I
Okay.
just think I just think Djokovic has still has the advantage on grass over the experience factor and just like the tear that he's been on. He tends to win these things in bunches. He's already won four in a row. Plus, he's going to try to go after Federer's record of eight Wimbledons. He's going to try to
Right.
equal that
Yeah,
next
that's
year.
insane. He's probably going to tie that next year. And in 2018, he's three. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, so I feel like it's going to be the hardcore ones, and of course, the U.S. Open feels like the most open one.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you could see someone like a Felix maybe winning,
Yeah, I
or
can see
maybe
Alcaraz
Alcaraz
winning that again.
repeating. Yeah, Alcaraz repeating. Maybe Felix getting one. Um, yeah, I mean, and then you do also have a lot of other wild cards, and you have a lot of younger players from Next Gen 2.0 coming up with
Mm-hmm.
likes of Jack Draper and Brandon Nakashima, Sebastian Corda,
Yeah,
Ben Shelton, who's won like three challengers in a row and became the youngest ever player to do that. And his ranking went up from like 600 to 96, so he's like just shot up, and he could be another one of those. I guess you could say Jensen Brooksby of this year, but like,
the increasingly problematic Jensen Brooks.
yeah, Brooksby is another one who's really kind of plateaued, hasn't he? Because
Yeah,
he's another one who, yeah, like once you get a scouting report on him now you feel like, okay, he doesn't really have a whole lot of offense. But with Shelton, I feel like that could be a little different because he is lefty, he has a really big wide serve. He has some sustainable patterns that he can repeat over and over, and he has a big forehand, likes to come to the net. He seems pretty athletic, so we'll see if like how long that carries over and where his ranking is at the end of the year. But yeah, you just have some players in the mid range there, and then you have Tiafo, who's capable of going on really big runs, and
mm-hmm.
yeah, so there's exciting. Like, you have some wild cards. You
Yeah,
still have the problematic Kyrgios and Zverevs, but you can never, yeah, like it's, you know,
yeah. I mean, kind of on Tiafoe, like best year for the American men in like how long? Like I feel like 2023 promises to be like between him and Fritz, and
yeah.
some others. Like they're dragging American men's tennis is dragging itself from like the bottom of the pit to like the side of the pit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just like the number of American men now that we have in the top 50. It's quite a lot now. Like it's almost 1/5 of the tour is American men.
Mhm.
Like in the yeah, I think Tiafo and Fritz are still my two at the end of next year that I think will probably finish the highest still.
Yeah, and
Um
I and
but like Sebastian Korda, if he figures out like if he just gets a little stronger and if he starts serving bigger and he starts
yeah,
getting a few more consistent results, I feel like he could break that mold. But
I agree. I
then I'm interested to see also what Nakashima does because having won the next gen finals, I mean, like
yeah
that's proven to be really big for a lot of these players. And he almost beat Kyrgios at Wimbledon. He could have been in the final there. So it's
yeah
like, um, yeah,
yeah.
this is a lot of good talent.
I think kind of like on the WTA, like if everyone's healthy, we could be headed for some majors where the fields are like stacked. And we're
Mm.
getting great matches in like the third and fourth rounds and not just, the
Yeah.
last couple. That's my
Yeah,
hope
especially
anyway.
because like the top 10, I feel like it's loaded because
Yeah.
like some players who are in the top 10 right now are not going to be there next year.
Hmm.
Like Hurkacz, I mean, he's gonna have to step up a little bit
Oh,
if he wants to
absolutely.
be in the top 10. I think Rublev will also have to, have another really good year again.
Yep. Yeah.
Like
I mean,
yeah,
I'm
like
curious.
have a really big result outside of winning titles at 250s and 500s.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah. Can he make the major semis for the first time?
yeah, like a major semifinal would be a really big breakthrough for him.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. I mean, he wasn't far away from that at Roland Garros.
yeah,
Took Cilic to the brink, but I think, as good as Cilic was in Paris, like I think well, major quarterfinals are usually going to be tougher than that, I would say. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, I think Djokovic gets Wimbledon. I think Nadal probably gets Roland Garros. I mean, as much as everyone has improved, like the best shot to beat him there is still Djokovic. I'd put Alcaraz like a hair behind at this point.
mm,
I think Djokovic probably gets Australia. Yeah, it's interesting because like even though we have the next gen coming on finally, and Alcaraz is there, Runa is improving really fast. You have Sinner, you have Felix, you have a bunch of great players. Like I think there's still a pretty likely scenario where Djokovic wins Australia and Wimbledon, Nadal wins
yeah.
Roland Garros, and then
Then it's just up to like how many of the Masters 1000s can you get? How
exactly,
many of the other titles can you win? And it's like
yeah,
yeah, and those will be decided by mostly the tier two players, and it's like Tsitsipas. I'm curious to see like does he have a really good clay season again?
hmm
Does he back up his semifinal from Australian Open? Does he do better at the U.S. Open? So like yeah,
yeah,
and it feels like a pretty big year, I would say, for the Medvedev Tsitsipas Zverev Ruud generation overall,
yeah,
just because they're gonna have to. Yeah, they're not only coming up against Djokovic and Nadal, but the generation behind them, which is like
yeah.
yeah, your Felix Alcaraz, Rune Sinner. It's like
Yeah, I think the pressure on Ruud is a little lower just because he had such a great year. Like this was his best year by far, and I think the others regressed. But I totally agree. Like for that block of players, like even though they're in their mid 20s, like time's running out.
yeah.
Like
And
you,
Ruud, like he had such a good year this year, but I sort of wonder like can he equal that? Like is this
yeah,
was this his
it's gonna
peak?
be
Like
hard to back
it's
up.
gonna be hard to see. But then like we said, like there's so many other openings where he didn't play like his very best. So he'll have to take advantage of those, I guess.
Yeah,
But like I
I
feel better about him maybe than I do about Tsitsipas and Zverev, and I wouldn't have said that 2 years ago. So it's
yeah,
like
I feel better about him too. Like I don't know if his game is better necessarily, but I think he's become a better player at least for the moment.
just solid mentally, and you have to respect the rate of improvement because he was 8 last year, and
Exactly.
he like his backhand is not a weakness anymore. So
Right.
it's like
He's become like a great defender. And I think that's the difference between him and those two. Like he, I think has made much more tangible improvements. I think
yeah,
Tsitsipas and Zverev have not changed that much in the past few
yeah,
years, really. Yeah,
like so it's yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like yeah, I think we can predict a lot of this. A lot of the same players would be in the top 10, but it's possible. Like we have one or two surprises.
Yeah, I agree. Um, I feel like even Fritz could like. Here's my like hot take about the Americans. I feel like one of Fritz or Tiafoe could get in the top five, maybe. I feel like the bottom end of the top five.
Yeah. I feel good about Fritz because he still has such a low hanging fruit at the majors.
Yeah,
Like especially the U.S. Open. Like, man, if he plays that match like 10 times, he doesn't lose. So it's like he's got to avoid matches like losses like that, like in the first round to Brendan Holt,
yeah,
or like he didn't even play for a lot of this year, and he finished number 9. And it's like,
yeah.
and he's
And
still
only went really deep at one major. So
yeah, which was Wimbledon, right? And then Australian Open. Yeah, he had chances to win that match against Tsitsipas as well. So it's like, yeah,
yeah,
he could.
I think he should gain points there.
Yeah, yeah, and
But
then same with Felix because it's
yeah,
like, yeah,
Felix
it's
could get in the top five.
yeah. I wouldn't be shocked to see him in a major final
Oh,
next
me
year,
either.
either
He's ready.
Wimbledon or
Um,
U.S. Open, because I feel like he's yeah. Some of his losses at majors have been very encouraging.
yeah. Um, I'm excited for where his rivalry with Alcaraz goes as well, because that seems to be a pretty good
Yeah,
matchup for him. So if they were to meet like late in, I'd like to see it in best of five. If they could meet in a late round, that'd be awesome.
yeah, and like at a major again because yeah, we didn't get to see what would happen in that U.S. Open match that took place, and then the other two matches have been on indoor hard court, so it'd be
Yeah,
interesting to see outdoors on the other surfaces how does that play out, and of course Alcaraz coming back from his oblique tear as well.
right. That I think is a huge factor because I think if he comes back to the Australian Open playing like he did in that Miami Madrid stretch, besides Djokovic, it's his to win as much as anyone's. But if that doesn't happen, then it's a lot more up in the air.
Yeah, it's crazy because Alcaraz to me is also the most improved player of this year, and it's
Yeah,
like when
definitely.
he went from 32 to 1. And so he went from a guy like, how many people just get like stuck in the middle? Like they're like, who get stuck between like 10 and 15. And we're
Yeah,
like, oh, can he do this next year? And it's like, we have to
right.
go step by step by step. But he just like eclipsed all those steps. And now he's like,
Yeah.
now he wants to win Wimbledon and he wants to get the other two. And now he wants to, like,
He
and
was
it's
like
going to
ranked
be
sixth
insane.
by like the middle of the year, right?
Yeah, like in 2030, he's going to be 26 years old.
Yeah.
It's
It's a
like
joke.
just saying that out loud makes me laugh at this point.
Yeah.
It's like,
I we got so lucky with Swiatek and Alcaraz. Like
I
I
mean, especially for the ATP because you had Federer retiring this year, and then so now it's like you have the big two, and then you have this guy who's off that same mold, if you like, of like greatness, and he just filled in the spot. It's like
yeah,
it's amazing, and you would obviously you would love to see Team get back there. You'd like to see
yeah,
Wawrinka squeeze out the last 1 or 2 years that he has left. Same with Andy Murray, of course, but it's just. Yeah, I feel like the ATP is in a really good spot because of this Alcaraz burst that they got this year.
yeah. I think in some ways like and if Djokovic and Nadal split the first three majors of the year, this will not happen. But I think in some ways this year, like with the retirements, it was sort of like and Alcaraz coming up it was sort of like the start of something. And I wonder if next year is going to be a bit of an indicator of like how the next few years will go. Like next year feels big to
Yeah,
me.
yeah, and especially because Djokovic and Nadal are not playing that many tournaments, and
Exactly.
you would expect the same thing again next year, to be honest. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for players at the Masters 1000 level, at the 500 level, and if Alcaraz does lose early, who's going to take advantage? Who's going to
Mm-hmm.
step up? It makes it so exciting. I think
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Yeah. I'm
I can't
looking
wait.
forward to it. Yeah.
I can't wait. And of course, we have United Cup coming up, and Nadal's going to be playing in that. We could already have a Nadal Kyrgios potentially by the end of this year, and it's like then we could
Too
have
soon.
yeah, too soon for that kind of drama right now. But
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah, and then after that we have the Adelaide tournament, we have
Mhm.
some board tennis, and then Australian Open starts, and it's just all going full swing again.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited to get into it. Yeah. On that note, I think I need to go eat dinner, but
Yeah,
it was good to recap some stuff and look ahead. Yeah. Um,
it was quite good because we covered so much,
we did
and we
cover a
ended up
lot. This is almost 2 hours, really, or an hour and a half.
I think we did well to keep it under 90 minutes.
Yeah. um, so yeah, I'll end the recording.
But
Um,
but yeah, to our listeners, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, uh, Happy New Year if you're listening to this by the start of 2023. Keep up all the great engagement on social media. Follow us on Twitter. Follow Popcorn Tennis.
Thanks.
Yeah, follow me at BunchV2K. Follow you at Tennis Nation. Follow Andre at Rolandberg Andre. Make sure to check out his work for Tennis Canada as well. And feel free to rate, comment, subscribe, like all of that jazz on podcast platforms. And yeah, continue listening in 2023 because we'll have some more episodes. Owen will actually be in Australia, so hopefully we'll get some in-house content from Owen. Of course, yeah. We're not making any promises there, but we're definitely looking forward to have one of our team members there.
Yeah, I mean, like with this sort of thing, I don't believe it's going to happen until it's happening. So like when I'm there, absolutely, like we will do podcasts. But like right now, it still feels fake in my head. So
yeah.